Hello and welcome to SaaS Marketing Insights, the show where we ask SaaS founders, CEOs, marketers and investors about the lessons they've learned in their quest to grow their companies. My name is Paul Stevenson and I'm founder and CEO of SaaS marketing agency 47 Insights. On today's show, I have an interview with Owen Matthews, General Manager at Wesley Clover. Hope you enjoy it. So, Owen, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Great to have you here.
Yeah. No problem. I always show up when you call.
This is going to be fun, I think.
Could be.
You might be a bit of trouble. Okay, so you are unique in that you're the first person on this podcast, video show, whatever you want to call it, where we have interviewed somebody who invests in software companies. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really interested in understanding the perspective that you have and how that differs from, say, what a CEO might think about marketing or what a marketer might think about marketing. So first of all, how did you get started on your journey to be an investor in software and other businesses?
Sure. I mean, my history as an investor, hopefully, like most good investors, starts with understanding companies and having built companies. So I started a company when I was supposed to be in school. I was in computer sciences and psychology and doing my degree. And then it was a very exciting time in technology companies, late 90s. And being in school seemed a lot less exciting than putting up a PowerPoint presentation and having people throw money at you. So I started up a technology company, lived through the massive downturn that happened in 2001. Difficult time, but we survived through that. And
so that was a kind of dot-com hangover.
It was a little bit of a dot-com hangover, but we did, a few years later, successfully sell the company to a public company, and that brought me back into the family business. So investing in technology companies is a family business for me. So when I sold my company, I then looked at the portfolio of companies that were in our family investment firm and started helping out, and that naturally grew into making investment decisions out of that. So I started a company, grew it, sold it successfully, and then started looking at and helping investments, and then making investment decisions ultimately, which is what I do now.
Fantastic. So that's how you got started. Mm-hmm. So you started off in software. You had a business, you built it up, you mm-hmm. sold it. Like you say, probably the best thing to have done. What was the first outside investment that you made in terms of like a software company? Can you remember that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Extending on from a little bit of my history, leading to answer that question, I turned to the family investment firm where I was now working for in the late 2000s, and I said, okay, great, so now I'm an investment professional, do I have a budget to make investments? No. Okay. Well, how about I propose this particular investment that I think is a really great company. I think we should invest in that. Can we make the investment decision? No. Okay. Well, it's a bit awkward then being an investment professional when you don't have a budget or any capital or can't make investment decisions. So I set about, finding a way to create companies from scratch. Because I had available budget to do that, I went to government agencies and said, look, we're experts at creating companies. We've been doing it for a long time, and I also knew how important it was to create companies. And at the time, it was engineering students didn't really have a path to entrepreneurship. It's not like now where you've got a million incubators and you can just put your hand up and develop a company based on some application. It was hard work, and you really needed a path to show people, and that allowed me to build a year and a half or 2 years of credibility with a team and make them investable. Starting out with an idea, or starting out with a team and saying, hey, we should invest in this, when they don't necessarily have traction, they don't necessarily have customers, was very difficult. So what I did is I created the deal flow and brought it to Wesley Clover, the investment firm, and that prompted the investment. It's like, yes, they've got customers, yes, they've got credibility, they've stuck together as a team, so it's worthy of an investment, and you can evaluate it, and it made sense to invest in it. So I started out being an investment professional without budget, and found a way to create companies and create value, which is always the way. I mean, CEOs should be thinking that way. Lean startups and investors should be thinking that way as well. They shouldn't be taking their investors' money and spending it carelessly. You should be thinking hard. And if there are ways to do it with less, then work hard to uncover those ways. So I created a portfolio of technology companies without that early stage funding from private investors. I did it, for the good of the country and to create a group of technology companies, which has done really, really well, and obviously ran great programs and met all of the expectations of government for a number of jobs created and that kind of thing. So my path was creating a company myself, working hard, understanding budgets, building software. In the old days when you actually distributed software,
CDs. And
not quite, we weren't that bad. It was digital
USB
distribution. It was digital distribution, but it was definitely installed on a computer, and to where we are today, which is maybe my view on SaaS is informed by that. I went through all of the pain of those distributions and how awkward it is and you have to charge your customers to manage update cycles and think 20% of your purchase price is this ongoing maintenance, and it was not anywhere nearly as useful as say SaaS offerings are today. So I come from a background that didn't have that, and I really understand the value of it, so I think that informs how we invest now. But that first investment was always focused as SaaS, maybe because I understood that pain, and so that's the first company was a SaaS company. I recognized SaaS as a growing market, and I wanted that SaaS company to service SaaS companies because I felt it was a growing market, and so my very first investment was very focused on both a SaaS offering as well as servicing the growing market of SaaS companies. So my entire investment career has been in and around that as a market.
So given this experience that you've had investing in SaaS companies, you must see marketing in particular from a slightly different prism from the way a CEO or a marketer would see it. So over your time, you must have seen some great successes with marketing, some great failures. I'm just keen to understand how you value marketing from an investor perspective and what you look for in a startup that would then lead you to believe that there is potential there.
Sure. So SaaS marketing to me is a very important issue when I evaluate a company. I doubt I'm unique when it comes to my focus on SaaS marketing for companies. I refer to it a bit more broadly as digital customer acquisition because digital customer acquisition is not just SaaS focused, and certainly it's not just marketing. It's all of the elements around building the funnel, acquiring the customer, and in fact, digital customer acquisition doesn't really cover it because there's the reactivation, the lifetime value, there's all that other stuff which is equally important. But none of that kicks in if you don't have the customer acquisition in the first place. So I hone in on that aspect of it. For me, I will not consider a company that does not have a sound digital customer acquisition strategy. So regardless of the technology, regardless of the market opportunity, regardless of any other element of the business, if you are not considering acquiring customers in a digital way which can scalable. If you're not thinking about digital customer acquisition as a machine that you tinker with and improve on a regular basis, then I'm not interested in investing. So for me, that's the one very clear, a hard rule: will not consider a company that isn't building a machine to acquire customers. And that's informed by some of the research that we've done. I looked at, in the past 10 years, all the companies that became unicorns. Something like 90% of them, are all acquiring customers in a digital way as their primary methodology. And as a group, they're the fastest growing, companies in the world, and obviously are successful with high values. So it is a wave globally around the world that affects every industry. And it's not just industry. I mean, the way that you acquire votes, sometimes not so legitimately, but whether it's votes, whether it's, government services, whatever it is, you have to engage people, and you have to engage them and get them to use those services, and so all of the facets of educating your customer with content marketing and getting in front of them or building brand, the earlier on stuff all the way through to reactivation, they're critical, and to me that is a very strong correlation to success. If you're good at acquiring customers, you can tinker with the product, you can start moving the knobs around to create a more positive outcome. Yeah. You can do that kind of thing, if you're at least in the business of getting customers through the doors. You can, improve, your lifetime value of the customer. You can improve the product. You can open up new products when you have them coming in the door, and new services. So for me, that's a critical component that is just absolutely necessary for me to consider with respect to any investment. So that is the lens at which I consider every company that walks in the door. Is the typical SaaS marketing, toolkits. So that is the way in which I consider my investment. Now, I say I'm not unique in that respect. I definitely speak about it overtly as a very important criteria. A lot of other investors are doing the same thing, but they use different language. They'll say things like, "Well, show me the lifetime value, and what's your revenue, and what's the recurring revenue model," and they're definitely considering the same things. Yeah. They typically just don't overtly say, "Hey, it's about customer acquisition. It's about digital customer acquisition." So for me, it's very important. And I would also caution a little bit when I look at a company and they come in and they say, "Look, this is our customer acquisition playbook," and they start talking about, as happens with investors, we've done this before, and we have this methodology, and look at the experience of the team, making assumptions about your ability to acquire customers based on past experience doesn't for me ring true, because every product, every constituent audience is different. So you can't come in with your playbook and say, "I know this works and this is how it's going to happen." You have to say, certainly to be credible to me, we may have done this before. We have experience. This is our toolkit, but we don't know which part's going to work.
We still have to validate this.
We still have to come in with the experimental attitude. Yep. And even if you are validating it and you're showing you've got proof points, you say these are our proof points. We're still going to be experimental. We're still going to try and optimize it. We're still going to be turning the dials to make this better. But coming in and saying we've got the playbook, we know how to do this, it just doesn't ring true to somebody like me, because we know every constituent market and every audience is a little bit different. And the playbook that worked in the previous market, even if they seem really, really similar, may not work. So there's cautionary tale about how important it is to me with respect to digital customer acquisition, SaaS marketing, but also it's important enough that we understand it enough to know that experience doesn't necessarily play as well in other areas, compliance, CFO type stuff. Experience really does matter. And in digital customer acquisition, sure, experience matters, but you have to come in with that, but this market's different, and we're going to test and try. And if you're not coming in with that attitude, you can't say, we know we're going to generate X traffic and X returns, and because the people that are knowledgeable will pick that apart.
Absolutely. So from your experience or viewpoint, do you see any particular channels being broadly better than others, or methods, or is your view just 100%? You've got to try some different things, and you've got to validate them. You don't have a kind of, because the thing that you mentioned, the word that you mentioned is playbook. I hate that playbook word.
Yeah, because there's
it's
so
just
many
like
different ways.
cookie cutter, and
Yeah.
it never is like that.
It
you know?
never works. And even if you were talking about the exact same market in the exact same company, what worked 3 months ago isn't going to work now. So even within the company, you must constantly think about the different ways in which your audience, customer, citizen is responding. So you can't come in with a playbook or a dogmatic mindset. It doesn't work. So for me, the methods that tend to work typically surprise me. You can take broad assumptions like, if it's a B2B SaaS, you're not advertising on Facebook, sure. And yet at the same time, you'd really be surprised about how often it works, or how it works, or what's converting. And what, for example, I doubt you'd find a digital marketer that wasn't on Facebook. Well, if they're there, they're probably reading work stuff and have colleagues that are there. So I'm constantly surprised about what thread of digital marketing is working. So it'd be difficult for me to say, I'm really surprised about this working. We've seen companies where Quora is a massive converter. We've seen companies where email training is a massive converter. It's so difficult because where is your audience, or where is your customer base? Where are they communicating? Where can they be influenced? Where can you create a brand experience that you didn't expect? It's difficult. You definitely, when we're thinking about what's working, we have a philosophy of go to where you think the rich target rich environment is, and trying that first.
Yeah, of course.
But those are assumptions. But
Yeah.
that's the beauty of digital marketing is
Test and measure.
It seems like a good idea. If you don't get results, try something else.
Yeah.
And you keep at it. And then once you've established something, you still keep at it, and you still experiment, back at the way that you did it before, and try go back to the same, channels that you try. But I am constantly surprised about what works.
So I know we've talked before, and you have a view on this, that, say you have a startup business, and we're here in Victoria and BC, and I think we have the same issues here that a lot of other places have: San Francisco, Vancouver, Seattle. It's actually, one of the biggest bottlenecks is actually finding people that have the skills to actually do this marketing and deliver on it.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you had any views on that in terms of what should change in the industry, or why is it so difficult to find good marketers?
So we've taken the approach that we just train them. So there's good news in that when you think about an experimental attitude, having someone that's got 20 years of experience matters less, because you have to test and measure and that kind of thing. So it is trainable, and it can be trainable fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Experience goes a long way when you think about test and measure and what you've seen work in the past, but you certainly can't come in, assuming it's going to work. So you can't come in with your playbook and say, I've done this before, I know it'll work. So the idea of, broadly, hey, try this channel, try that channel, is good guidance, but they are trainable skills. So the nuts and bolts work of digital marketing is the kind of thing you can train. As an industry, I think there should be a lot more training. I have not seen good programs, so much so that we think about doing that for our companies internally as a portfolio. Sure. How do we just train people to go into those companies, because our portfolio is big enough that there's an ongoing need for people with these skill sets. But it's not it's not like brain surgery. You need 15 years of training, right? So it is trainable, but there really is not enough people being trained in it, and it's a different type of training. It's training, it could look like this, but remember to not necessarily follow the playbook.
Yeah.
So the classical sort of training, here's the textbook and here's the methodology and do this and you'll be successful. It doesn't work in that kind of teaching environment. It really has dogma. It has to be hands-on, right? Hands-on with a lot less dogma. So So my view is much more training in the area would be important. My view is that we train people because there's just a lack of them around that could come in and do those roles, and that's a risk, and it takes time, and it's a challenge. So as an industry, I feel that there is constant demand for people in that field. So definitely a good place to be. It's hugely valuable. So you go back to marketing, even 20 years ago when I started technology companies, marketing did a particular thing. It was like brand and supporting sales and stuff like that. Now, marketing, certainly in the SaaS world, is sales. There's a direct correlation between good marketing and good results.
And it's like 90% of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And
in terms of customer acquisition.
And the conversion part, even if it's, phone call, custom, it's still done in like 15-minute increments. It's not done in like over months of sales process in many cases. So it really, the role has changed to being critically important and therefore lots and lots of opportunity. So I think we definitely need more people constantly looking for good people, and that'll be true everywhere. Victoria happens to be pretty special in that for whatever reason, 15 odd years ago, we put a lot of energy into digital customer acquisition. I think because we had less venture money. There are very few venture capitalists based here. So, I would argue I might be the only one.
Well, it's good for you.
Yeah, there are some great angels and certainly other investors around. But in terms of, like an investment firm, I think we're the only one. So, there wasn't a lot of venture money around at all, 20 years ago. So, bright people want to build something for themselves. They have to find a way to do it, and they find a way to do it in ways that immediately make money, which is with digital customer acquisition. So we were really pioneers in Victoria in digital customer acquisition, and as a result, most of the companies that are successful in this town are somehow related to digital customer acquisition. So to me, I'm constantly surprised when I go to other places that are a bit more traditional. It's so obvious that the path is, the right path for so many companies is, SaaS marketing and digital customer acquisition. And yet I still bump up against this archaic, salesperson, sales channel kind of mentality. But then again, I'm in a place we're really pioneers in that area. So I'm pretty fortunate that way. But we constantly need people. I think the need will continue to grow, and you can do it anywhere. So, customer acquisition, making companies successful, it doesn't matter where you are. And that means that, the sort of the value of technology companies around the world can grow. They don't have to be centrally
tied to a...
And if you're acquiring customers from around the world and you've got the right strategies and the right methodologies, it's not like they're looking at where your headquarters are. They're just they like what you do, and the on-ramp was easy, and they tried it, and it works for them, and these great things. Oh, great, okay, we're a customer now. All of those strategies and all of those methodologies, physical locations and distribution, all really doesn't matter. So you can do it from anywhere. So I'm seeing growth around the world with respect to customer acquisition and technology companies, and I think that's a great thing. Yeah, I think it creates opportunities around the world, but it will be driven by the value of those digital marketers, and there's nowhere near enough of them. So definitely need a lot more of them. They'll have a huge sort of growing value inside most technology companies, and it colors the view of everything that we do.
So we talked a little bit there on about Victoria here, but if I'm right, Wesley Clover actually invests internationally all over
the world. Yeah.
So you must see developments in different countries. So, for example, SaaS in China, which is something that I'm not familiar with. Is it marketed the same way? Is it following the sort of the patterns, or are they developing their own techniques?
So we've seen the techniques with respect to digital customer acquisition in China, and to answer your question specifically, you probably meant it more broadly, but but to answer your question specifically, with respect to I found the sophistication of the platforms that you use for ad buying and performance marketing They're not quite as sophisticated as customers. They're not saying, I know it's going to make me $1.50, so I'm willing to pay 75 cents for you to bring me that customer. It's a little less, it's still highly transactional, being performance marketing, but it's a little less specifically performance to an outcome. It's like I need to buy traffic. And I know that traffic will translate into improved customers
Eventually.
or downloads or whatever. But there's not as tight a correlation like I'm not going to pay you unless that turns into a customer. I'm going to pay you for the traffic and the reference and the download. Whereas I found in the North American performance markets, they're getting more and more targeted to
that attribution all the way through.
I know that I make 75 cents for selling the hamburger. If you sell the ad, for 50 cents and I make 75, great, but I'm only going to pay you the 50 if I actually sold the hamburger.
Yeah.
Right? So that kind of really specific attribution has been more sophisticated in the North American market. In the Chinese market, we haven't seen that yet. It's still a lot of ad buying. It's a lot of, lower conversion rates,
that sort of thing.
less specific correlation to an outcome.
Yeah.
I think it's coming, and I don't think it'll be long before it gets there. But we're seeing less of that. I still see a lot of sort of traditional Salesforce fundamental technology as an approach in China. Still see that. We have an investment fund in India. I still see that in India. Very, very traditional. They all want to build applications and they all want to be involved in mobile because it's cool and growing, and they all necessarily want to build apps. But the larger companies are still very traditional in their approach. And it's a protected market, so it's not like Walmart is rolling in there with their e-commerce program. Definitely a protected market. So I think there's plenty of room for opportunity there. We also have an investment fund in Istanbul, in Turkey, and again, very traditional market. So bringing those methodologies, we feel will have us stand out and be successful in those markets. Certainly in North America and Victoria in particular, highly sophisticated with respect to customer acquisition. And Israel, we do a lot of interaction with performance marketers in Israel, and they're very sophisticated with respect to their performance marketing. And I'm sure that correlates into all the other aspects of digital marketing.
So as an investment firm, you've got a real opportunity to sort of take the best of what's happening in terms of digital customer acquisition, SaaS marketing, and actually then apply that, and transfer that knowledge around your portfolio.
We use the investments in foreign countries as market intelligence. What's happening in that market, and does it make sense to take a piece of technology that was developed in North America and go after the market in Turkey and India and China? Or vice versa, do we see an opportunity in China that they are speaking to, local companies and local customers, finding out something, and they can look at that and sort of collect information around our portfolio and say, well, that's not really a global opportunity; it's just a local opportunity. Now China's big enough that it wouldn't matter anyway. But I'll take Turkey as an example. They might look at that and say it's a local opportunity, but it's already solved in Europe or it's already solved in North America, and therefore the big machine that solved it is coming, and you just don't know it yet, and therefore it's a really niche opportunity to Turkey. Or they might have developed something, and we go look at the market here and say, you know what, that's a global opportunity. Push that button hard because you've uncovered something which hasn't been solved elsewhere, and you can do it from Turkey, and you can sell around the world. When you use these methodologies. So so we use it as market intelligence.
Cool. So you're a really, really busy guy.
Not for you.
You're busier than I am. Believe me, you are. How do you? Where do you find your inspiration in terms of because we've talked about different things, and you always seem to have a view on anything.
Not necessarily an accurate view,
but it's an informed view. It's an educated view. So you obviously spend a lot of time reading and getting inspiration from somewhere that then informs the investment decisions that you make.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Well, I'll tell you the San Francisco answer. I like to read 15 books a week. I do audiobooks. I biohack with microdosing, and I like to be creative, and And the world around me, gives me billions of dollars to spend. So every now and then I make a unicorn. No, I'm far less boring. I find reading a huge challenge. I've got a busy family life. I've got 3 kids. All of the chaos that happens there. So I'd love to read more, and I do thoroughly enjoy it, but don't have a lot of time for it, unfortunately. Uh, and and as much as I talk about the importance of digital customer acquisition and digital marketing, I come from the school of relationship selling. That's how I was successful early in my career, and it's also how we all absorb information a little bit better as people. So I really enjoy speaking to people and absorbing information, and I happen to be pretty good at that. I can have a conversation with someone and really get to understand quite quickly their view, their unique set of knowledge, and I absorb it really, really well. So I spend a lot of time speaking to my colleagues around the world and understanding what's happening in their world. I spend a lot of time speaking to other investors, and I really I quiet the internal monologue, and I think in fact I coach my CEOs and management teams to do this. It's less, at least the way in which I learn, and I think most people learn, is I stop thinking about what I'm going to say, and I stop thinking about the importance of my internal monologue, and I start paying really, really close attention to the other person. And the more I do that, the more I learn from them. And the more I learn from them, the more those things ring true, and I can test them in my companies, in my own life. I can go, I actually heard what you said. I understood it. It actually impacted me. And I don't necessarily believe it, but I might try it. And then I'll try those things, or I'll do certain things, and I find that informs a lot of my worldview is taking those pieces of information from so many people. And sometimes they're very brief conversations, but if you're really tuned in to what people are saying, you can absorb a huge amount of information. And this is amazing view, and people are phenomenally complicated and have such interesting experiences. So, as someone who is thinking about a machine, a bunch of software and a bunch of ad buying and a bunch of marketplaces, and how incredibly important that is to the success of the company, ultimately what fulfills me, and I love my job, and don't feel like I need to seek solace from it. I'm very fortunate in that way, and it's all I've ever known. I grew up in startup companies, as a young kid. I really just didn't know any other life, but I really do love what I do, and that's because of the exact opposite of what I encourage the companies to do, which is it is highly interactive. So as an investor, I'm interacting with teams. I'm keeping them strong. I'm managing the culture. I'm listening really intently to what they're experiencing and coaching them through it and learning from them, throughout the process. So I get exposed to full time working with CEOs, understanding what strategies are working, and that really fulfills me. But not because I'm an investor advocating, or not because I'm an investor dictating. Those are typically pretty poor investors. They might be highly influential, and controlling, and can make their company successful by virtue of that. But I like strong teams that are legitimately in control of their companies, and I'm a guide and a mentor, and yes, an investor, but at the same time, I'm helping them be successful because of my really active involvement. And I find that very fulfilling. So for me, I would say the time that I find, personally, fulfilling and recharging is the time I spend speaking with people that might change my view, or provide a surprise view to me. So meeting with people from different backgrounds and really legitimately paying attention to what they're saying and how they're feeling and what their worldview is, I find informs me on subjects that would be pretty random. We have conversations often, and you might turn to me and go, "How on earth does he know that?" It's probably because I took the time to speak to the cab driver, or speak to the person beside me on the plane, or whatever it is, and I did. It wasn't passing politeness. Legitimately, I was interested in who they were and what they had to say, and then I tested it, and then I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to go read that news article. I'm going to go do that thing that they said worked, and that informs a huge amount. So I'm the kind of person that'll, have a brief conversation and then go away and just can't help myself at 3:00 in the morning and go and study it, and the next day be like, did you know that, Anyway.
So you're inspired by people, and you're a highly promiscuous networker with people.
Yes, yeah. I love people. I love working with people. I love seeing people be successful. So we're very funny as an investment firm, spending an awful lot of time with people who are not our investments and helping them. We across the board have done that for a long time, and it's very fulfilling. And often people look at us and go, our best investor was that guy, and he didn't even invest. So it is funny. But no, I find that. Legitimately one of my great
you get a kick
joys.
out of genuinely helping people.
Yeah. Well, that it's the most rewarding thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and setting up good cultures and helping people set up good cultures so they can carry that on. I think is probably my best work, independent of the money that we raised or the people that we hired or all of that kind of stuff. Really, the lasting legacy is teaching the people to take the same approach that I take, to help for the sake of helping, and that leads to success. The minute you stop thinking about the number becomes easy.
Yeah.
Whether it's the sales, whether it's the investment, whether it's the...
Owen, thank you very much. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I've learnt a lot.
Anytime. Great to see you again.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Owen. For more info on Wesley Clover, please visit www.wesleyclover.com. For more info about this show and to get our links to iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube, check out www.47insights.com. And if you have any SaaS marketing insights that you'd like to share on the show, please get in touch. Until next time.